Welcome to Do Your Dailies, the podcast designed to help you on your journey of addiction recovery. We're going to go through the big book of AA and use our collective experience, strength, and hope to help you understand what addiction recovery really looks like. So grab some snacks, sit back, press play, and dig deep. Thanks for being here. Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of the Do Your Dailies podcast. I'm Chris, here with Joe and Dave, and we're going to dig right into Chapter 5, How It Works. So page 58. Guys, it's awesome to be with you today as always. How is it so far?
Today, when I got up and knew it was Chapter 5, I was really looking forward to sitting down with both of you and doing a deep dive into this, because this part of the book for me really shows us where the rubber hits the road and the things that we need to start actually understanding in a deeper way to assist us with everything that we've learned up to this point, because we've learned about the disease, we've learned about the solution. Now we have to actually get a better grasp on how then do we apply that, and that's the good news of what we get to step into today.
I agree. This is like stepping into the gym. All right, we can talk about it, but now it's time to put some weight on. It's time to go do some things. I will say to you folks that I walked in this morning and both these gentlemen made fun of me at the speed at which I was walking. It was rather slow and deliberate and ginger. And why? Because I did go to the gym today, and I'm 67, and there was a contest that no one else knew about but me with some young guys, and of course they didn't know there was a contest, and I went home and took ibuprofen and had to lay down, and they just went about their business.
So the question I have is, did these young men, were they in their 20s, and did you win or did they win?
Well, yes, they're in their 20s, and I'm going to invoke what I call revisionist history. So the way I remember it.
Of course.
This is good work. I would invite all of you to really pay attention to this one. We're going to try our very best to do this the honor that it deserves. But these are some powerful words that are about to come. So I invite you to buckle up and dig in with us here.
Real fast, and then we'll dive in. I love that you said revision. You admitted revisionist history, because I was going to mention just kind of the reality of perception and how, we hear what we want to hear. And so I don't know that we'd ever dare make fun of Dave just for survival, in this world. But
I would, even knowing that I'm maybe crossing the threshold. Because Dave gives as good as he gets, though, too. And that's the one thing I've always respected about Dave.
That's true. That is true.
There's a lion with thin hair and no teeth.
Joe and I, we know something about that hair side of it. But anyway, so to page 58, you guys, join with us. And we're going to dig in. It says, rarely. Now, before that, how it works. And it's been mentioned recently that, we've talked about the problem. We've talked about what got us here. And now, and for the remainder of the big book, we're focusing on solutions. We're focusing on being happy, healthy, successful, and all of that.
What's it?
Great question.
How it works, but what's it?
The solution. Happiness, peace. It's however we define it. That old question of what is normal, and it kind of depends on where you're sitting, what your environment is like, what your upbringing was like.
I would also tee this up with a comment that I made a little bit ago, and that is, this is written in past tense. So this is the real juice of the recon report. This is a scouting report. They've come back. They've written their story. This is what they did. It's not about what they're going to do or any of that. This is what they did, and they've written it down and given it to us. So,
all right. Page 58. Rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. Those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to this simple program. Usually men and women who are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves. So, as we have worked together in the recovery rooms, that phrase is one of, in my opinion, in my experience, one of the most known about AA. Rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. What does that invoke? What thoughts, what emotions does that bring up in you guys, even 2 sentences in?
So for me, looking at it from the perspective of how I see it kind of today compared to when I first got introduced to it, the first time a person reads this, they don't get the magnitude of what's really being said. The history around this, and I'm going to let Dave address this next, but when it says rarely we've seen a person fail who's thoroughly followed our path, it's like it goes back to what Dave was referring to. What is the it we're referring to? The it is the program. It's like the knowledge of the disease, the knowledge of the solution, and the application. And when they're saying rarely have we seen a person fail who's thoroughly followed our path, it's like those who actually step into this and rigorously do this with full intent in doing everything that's been asked of them. The promise literally in that is that, rarely have we seen a person fail. In other words, they will get the promises associated with what has been given to them. We will be getting into those in the subsequent chapters, but the reality of just that one sentence alone tells us quite a lot that if we really get into this and we apply everything that's given to this, that you're not going to fail. And if you're not failing, what are you doing? You're being successful. Your disease is going to be arrested. You're going to have a spiritual awakening as a result of the steps, and you're going to be put on new ground like it's been talking about and rocketed in the 4th dimension of existence that you could not even dream. I don't think a lot of people understand what that means, but it's like recovery brings to your life a new dimension of happiness and just an overwhelming joy that you're no longer trapped into the addicted cycle. And for me, I mean, that's what it's all about.
I have a thought. I'm not going to mention it now, but would you remind me? It's called the Miracle Day, and I want to talk about that. But I want to stay on track here. I've been in the human condition and dealing with people in addiction for several decades. And every 3 weeks I would address the family members, and they would invariably, someone would ask me, what are the success rates of people that go to treatment and do this? What can we expect? What is the success? And at the risk of being rather cavalier, I would say it's 100%. And they would look at me and they said, we've never heard that before. I said, well, I know that. Let me explain. And I would go to this sentence. Rarely have we seen a person fail who has, the operative word here is thoroughly followed the path. So he puts that word in very intentionally, thoroughly. And a page later now he's going to talk about half measures, and I experimented with all that. Thoroughly followed our path. The path that is written, the path that the directions that they will receive, and when in question, ask. Don't turtle up. Don't become closed off. Ask. I'm struggling with. In fact, this notion of being rigorously honest, incapable of being honest with themselves. You see, lying to others is irrelevant, because a lie to another only comes from a lie that we're telling ourselves. And when we're trying to self-protect and we're steeped in guilt and shame, it's very difficult for us to be honest with ourselves and go back in. And what does he mean by this? That constitutionally, deep down, the very infrastructure of who we are lying to ourselves. We're not telling the truth about our insecurities or our fears or what, we don't believe in God. So there's some very deep issues around our human infrastructure that we're not willing to address and speak out and tell the truth. Until we do that, we are going to supplant our feelings with alcohol and drugs to kind of mitigate that pain. But when we expose it, being honest, and it's really interesting, I'll comment here in a few minutes after we read a little more. So thoroughly following the path of being honest with themselves. There we go. I mean, he gives you the first preamble of what does it mean to thoroughly follow? Being honest with yourself. There's no question here. It's very, very direct. It's very simple. And so at the risk of being facetious or something like that, I just said it's 100%. If people do what we say. Now, am I to say that nobody's relapsed? I've relapsed myself. But what did I do? I got back on and said, okay, what's the truth about why I did that? And get back in. So this thoroughly followed our path is a critical piece. And I have written here in one of the first versions, it was thoroughly followed our directions, is what he said. Our directions. In other words, I will direct you as to what to do because this is what we did and it worked. So
there's more of an invitation. Followed our path. This is the path that we've taken. And I appreciate that note, Dave, about relapse. So many that will go into the rooms or into the offices or into the walls of recovery will make a statement such as this: I will never do that again. And sometimes in my experience, they fully believed it. They meant it. But were then unprepared to deal with what prevention really looks like. What's going to keep me from going back down that path? And it was a genuine promise, but a naive or ignorant commitment, not fully understanding how powerful the disease of addiction is. And then other times, folks would say, I promise I'll never do this again because when I get out of this place, I want to be welcomed home again. I want to be able to go to Thanksgiving dinner. And I've got to commit to these people, whoever they are, a boss, some peers. I've got to make it seem like I'm 100% committed, but in the back of my head, I've got back doors. I've got reservations and hesitations and some other issues, right? But that thorough is so crucial to this success. And it's not that we justify, well, I'm an addict, and so what did you expect? If there's a relapse. It's not that kind of attitude. It's, how did this happen again? Literally, how? Like, what were those steps that led me back to this? And how can I trace those steps backward and recognize that? Because it's going to happen again on some level. And it might be those early stages, but if we can catch it early, if we can recognize it and reroute, get back on course, whatever that looks like for the person, then we do a whole lot of prevention. And I used to say in residential treatment, for your first week, this is a treatment center. You're detoxing, you're getting well, you're kind of learning, getting oriented and everything. And then this treatment center transitions into a prevention center because we're trying to keep you from having to come back. We don't want you to have to come back. We want you to do that work to get well, stable enough to transition to that next level of care. And so I think it's crucial though to follow those steps. And I don't mean the steps that we're going to read, whether later today or next time, but thorough has to be understood what that means. All right, the next sentence. There are such unfortunates. They are not at fault. They seem to have been born that way. They are naturally incapable of grasping and developing a manner of living which demands rigorous honesty. Their chances are less than average. There are those, too, who suffer from grave emotional and mental disorders, but many of them do recover if they have the capacity to be honest. Joe, we've talked all over the last year and a half, that early on when we both were working in treatment, and Dave, I'll invite your thoughts too, I don't want to speak for you. It used to be, as therapists and counselors, we treated addiction. Yeah. Just addiction. Mm-hmm. And we've talked about how we don't see that anymore, where it's not just addiction or alcoholism. This the mental health issues, grave emotional and mental disorders, right? This dual diagnosis thing, and not necessarily the severe, serious mental illness, but depression, anxiety, traumas, real serious life disruption.
Today, they're almost always connected to working with addicts or alcoholics. There's no longer a separation. You're not just dealing with a person that's dealing with like alcoholism or chemical dependency. There's always that dual diagnosis piece now. I mean, everybody I'm seeing today, there isn't a separation any longer. I mean, in the early days, like over 20 years ago when I started, I could be guaranteed that I'd be dealing with probably a good half of my clientele just being completely addicted, but not having any secondary dual diagnosis. Today, it's everybody. It's fascinating.
I will say that we opened a treatment center and we made the decision we would not be treating people with dual diagnosis. And then the more I studied this, I said, well, now, wait a minute. We're treating alcoholism and drug addiction. Those aren't the problems. Yep. Those are coping strategies. Those are their solutions to another set of problems. The book even talks about we need to get to root cause. So I think that's an important piece. I would like to point out in the first paragraph in how it works, 3 times now it's talked about the same principle. It talked about being honest, it talked about demands of rigorous honesty, and it talked about the capacity to be honest. So if it's mentioned 3 times in the first paragraph, I submit to you that that's a critical piece of strategy right there. Do you have the capacity? That rigorous honesty is an interesting piece. Well, what's rigorous honesty mean? Does that mean I'm going to be honest now, but no, I'm going to be rigorous. So I'm going to get in a horse stance. I'm going to get in my fighting position. And a fellow taught me something a long time ago. He said, Dave, I want you to experiment with radical, rigorous honesty. And I said, to what avail? What are you talking about? And he said, you have become so adept and a master of lying, you do it for sport. And he said, I don't know that you understand the difference between truth and lie. You craft your narrative based on what's in front of you and what your next step is going to be. And there is no delineation between truth or not. And the book even talks about that. Earlier we talked about I can't differentiate the true from the false. And so this radical, he said, I want you to look 180 degrees. Before you speak, I want you to look at completely opposite what you're about to say. Go 180 degrees different and see if that's the truth. Start to analyze again. Look at this like a scientist. What am I really saying? And what is the motivation for what I'm about to say? Is it based in truth? Am I being honest? Am I disclosing what's really going on? Or am I being a manipulative, card shark here and trying to work some sleight of hand work?
What an interesting exercise, because what it says here, though, if we pay attention to the vocabulary, it says naturally incapable of grasping. And then it says developing a manner of living which demands rigorous honesty. So what it's literally saying is that this personality type is naturally incapable of change. If they don't do that rigorous state of like looking within themselves and doing a 180.
Yeah, and what I will tell you is that took a great deal of work. It was very pensive. It was very intentional. I had to stop and think, and it was remarkable what started to happen. It was what was shocking to me, what I didn't see coming, was just the sheer volume of lies and variations of the way I was talking to people. Something could happen, and by the time I told it, it was so much bigger, broader, and it was all about self-promotion, which is fear-based. I got to self-protect, and I got to self-promote. And regardless of what the truth is, my promotion is going to be much grander and bigger than what it was, so that you absorb it, and then just trying to manage. And he said, what you are is the CEO of your lie organization. And he said, Dave, that's a lot of work. So I can't remember what I told you, and I can't, So I'm trying to imagine, okay, but if I tell him, all of a sudden, boy, I got to have a drink. This is a lot of work to try to remember what and trying to remember the truth when you're hungover and intoxicated that's a challenging task, I'm telling you.
That's gentle.
So I just come back and reiterate 3 times the word honesty comes up. So I would just ask you, the listener, to do some deep dive there and say, what is my mode of operation? What is my manner of living right now? Is it honest or otherwise?
Next paragraph says, our stories disclose in a general way what we used to be like, what happened, and what we are like now.
Okay, I'd like to just stop there, and I'd like to address this because this is how I see going to meetings and getting somebody's experience, strength, and hope. Literally, does it not start with, this is what I used to be like, okay? This is what happened, and then this is as a result of like who I was, what happened, here I am today. That's kind of how I see the whole process of meetings. We share a story of like, this is who I used to be, this is what happened when I went through the 12 steps, and this is how the transformation occurred. This is who I am as the transformed man, going from the history of going through this, and who I am today.
In essence, what he's talking about, in my opinion, are the 3 states of the recovery process. We're talking about the problem, that's who I was. I'm talking about the solution, this is what I did. And I think most of us, and I need to be careful with this, but a lot of people stay in that place. This is what happened, and I stay in the solution too long without transformation. And that's what he says, and this is what we're like now. In other words, I'm a transformed person. It's different now.
Yeah.
It's a design for living, and I'm living into that, and I conduct myself differently. And I am different, and I do tell. And so to your point, Joe, in one sentence, there are the 3 aspects. I'm working with a guy right now, and part of the challenge is he's been, many, many years in the solution, which is fine, but he said, I haven't transformed. I'm not much different. And I said, the work is designed to move you to the next place. It's a transformational proposition, and so I think that's a very important piece.
For a long time, it's resonated with me, this idea of who I'm becoming, because I'm not there. I'm not done. We mess up all the time. I mess up all the time. Perhaps, hopefully, one of the differences now is noticing it, paying attention. Again, how did that happen? How did I get to that place? And let's reset.
If you think about it, it's like we always talk about the stock market. It goes up and then it drops, and then it drops and then it goes up and drops. But in generally, it's like this, and that's what we're looking at. That's why these SIPs are, and we'll talk about it a little later, that's why they're designed the way they are. We have some awareness, we live into it, we make some mistakes, maybe they're a lot smaller. I used to joke all the time and still do. I'm really, really good at making amends. Why is that? Because I make a lot of mistakes.
The human condition is always present.
But at least I'm aware that the amends process is available and I can have access to it and see things quicker, and correct them faster.
And sometimes that's an interpersonal skill set where I've offended somebody else or I've wronged somebody else, and I go to them and explain my understanding, my awareness, my comprehension for my side of the street. And without trying to manipulate their side of the street or clean their side of the street or point out what exists on their side of the street, I'm going to have that accountability, that personal accountability. And as scary as that might be, there's peace in that. I have control over that. There's a lot of things in this world we do not have control over. And so
this next one's this is a major grenade. This is a good one.
Let's see. It says, if hopefully I'm not rereading this. If you have, well, that's not actually, I'm going to make a point. If we reread this, good. Good.
Right.
To the listener and viewer, how many, I can't say how many times working in residential treatment, my worry, this is part of the transformation real fast. My worry that when I was preparing to go teach a group of 20, 30 people, whatever it was, and they would, how many of them have seen this already? And I've got to come up with something new. It's got to be fresh. And I'd go, and it was probably not my idea. It was probably mentors who said, it's new every time. If the person is willing and open, and if I'm prepared and I'm willing and open. And so one of the things I would love, going in to teach a workshop or recovery group or something, is I'm prepared. I got a couple of things up my sleeve. But I go in with probably 3 different colored dry erase markers. And as we do a little check-in, what's on your heart? What's on your mind? What do we need to talk about today? And if it was presented, if a topic was presented enough, that's the direction we'd go. Not being so, it has to be this way, but just having that openness. And the same topic can be addressed hundreds of ways, depending on the presenter, the audience member, the participants, their mood that day, their attention level, and those kinds of things. And so, lengthy way of saying, if we repeat, good. If you have decided you want what we have and are willing to go to any length to get it, then you are ready to take certain steps. At some of these we balked.
No.
No, we're not going to balk right now. No. I want to know about that grenade.
How does that sentence start? If. You say, if you've decided, not me, not your family, not anyone else, if you, Dave, if you have decided what? And what went into this decision? That you want what we have. Well, that means you must have seen something.
Yeah.
So this, you may not be able to, and I couldn't explain it. I just saw something in some men, and I said, and listened to their story. Well, how would that even become possible? First of all, they were older than me. How did you even live to tell the tale? Because if you're like me, I'm not sure, 40 is going to be a reality. 35 maybe.
Right.
So in other words, that means I've been somewhere and I have noticed something, and I've not just in passing, but I focused on it. I became fixed. Something I'm seeing so powerful that it resonates inside me, and it flips a switch, and I say, I don't know what that is. I can't explain it, but I want some of that. I don't even know what that is. I just can sense and feel that he's living in a very different way than I am. And years and years ago, I thought I was pretty handy with a horse, grew up with them, ranching, all that sort of thing. And I didn't think my uncles could keep up with me, and nobody could, and I was, all that in a bag of chips at 17 years of age. And I remember as a young man going to a ranch, and I watched this guy work alone on his horse with the cows. And I could see what he was doing, but I could not figure out how he was doing it. His hands never moved, his legs never moved, and that horse was just, they were one, and they were flowing and moving. And I said, I don't even know what I'm looking at, but I know I can't do that, and I want some of that. Whatever magic or whatever that is, I don't know. And that launched me into a discipleship of horsemanship. But this is the same thing. We're seeing something, and that's, again, to your point, Joe, we go to meetings and we listen to someone, and after the meetings or the coffee or whatever, and we're saying, you talk a different way. You say things that I didn't even know existed. So I have to decide, and this decision that we're making, he'll refer to it later on in the book. But then, Look what he says. If you want what we have and are willing to go to any length, well, what length are you willing to go? How important is this? And what are you willing to do? What I often see, or what I've seen many, many times, I want that, but I'm not sure I'm all in. And
are you willing to pay the price?
Yeah. And he addresses that in a couple of paragraphs, but we don't even, at least I shouldn't say we, I did not know what willing to go to any length even meant. I could not see the depth and the breadth, and I'm grateful I couldn't, because I wouldn't have understood it. But here's the key piece, is that I saw someone that had. So I don't know what you've done, but you've done something, and if you've done it, there's probably a pretty good chance I could do it. Vis-a-vis, here are the steps, and they give us the scouting report yet again. But I think this is important, that we have to be honest again with ourselves and say, am I really willing to go to any length?
Well, it gives us a caveat right after that willing to go to any length. Then you are ready to take certain steps. So it's qualifying us. It's saying, okay, if you've really made that decision that you want what we have, and you're willing to go to any length to get what we have and what we're offering to you, then if you're willing to take a few certain steps, that's the qualification. The problem is most people, they read over that, but they don't get the depth of really what that means. Are you willing to change, and are you willing to change everything?
Well, are you really willing to be honest with yourself?
Yeah. Well, then that's part of the change. It's like it first has to start. Step one, it's like, who am I making that admission to? I'm making that admission to myself. Why? Because I've been dishonest to everybody else out here, but I've been mostly dishonest to me inside of here. I'm completely blocked from God and his presence, because inside of me is just a continuing process of lying, cheating, and stealing.
At some of these we balked. We thought we could find an easier, softer way, but we could not. With all the earnestness at our command, we beg of you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. Some of us have tried to hold on to our old ideas, and the result was nil until we let go absolutely.
Okay, so I want to address this because I think this is another hand grenade personally. Okay, because as we read that, I'm just like, okay, that sounds like step 4. Okay, because it is, if you kind of connect the dots, this is what it's basically saying. At some of these we balked, at those steps that we have to take. We thought we could find an easier, softer way. That means our nature is still connected to, I've made a mistake. Can I go back to the old person I was? But we could not, is what it says. With the earnestness at our command, we beg of you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. That's for me, the language of the steps really is an invitation to understand that what we're really being shown, and glaringly so, is that the first real true roadblock that's going to come up, that's going to make us want to have an easier, softer way, is to fearlessly look within ourselves, to do our inventories, and to really go through that, and to be thorough from the very start of the whole process, from the admission of what we've created within ourselves, and going through the journey of looking at the wreckage that we've created. But it says this: some of us tried to hold on to old ideas. That's another thing that's totally tied into this thing called recovery. Our old ideas have to give way to new ones. We cannot hold on to the old ideas, because that's the thing that has kept us sick. And the result was nil until we let go of those old ideas completely. And this is just the truth of it. I did not let go of all of those ideas until I went through the process. I was still having to compete within myself, where it's like, do I really want to do this? I don't have any resentments, but I have a lot of fears, and I had a lot of this. I had a sponsor that loved me enough to tear up my first step 4 and say, here you go. And he's like, do you have any resentments now? And I cussed him out, and I cussed him out because I didn't realize that the reality of what he was saying is you're no different than me or any other human being. We all have resentment. And that was just a case in point of how easy it was to get me into a state of resentment. He's like, you need to do this again. Don't waste my time.
There's another point here that I think is important. This is not theory here. He's not surmising what may happen to you. He's reporting what happened to them. We thought we could find an easier, softer way, but we could not. And the old version was, and we doubt if you can as well.
Ooh.
So it's about being brave. It's about, we beg of you. Why would he say that? Because they experienced not being fearless and not being thorough, looking for a softer way, and many of them didn't make it. And so he's again giving us a detailed after-action report. This is what happened to those that didn't.
And this is what happens to those that do.
Exactly.
I can't help but think of the first client. I'd had this happen to peers when I was younger, but the first client I lost to overdose. In this next line, it says, "Remember, we deal with alcohol." And every time that comes up in my mind, I go, "And heroin." And it's not just alcohol; it's heroin and meth and cocaine and gambling and pornography and sex and adrenaline rushes and theft and criminal conduct, whatever it is. To me, a drug is a drug is a drug. There are physiological changes that take place in the addict, no matter what the drug of choice or behavior of choice is. And so as I read this, and as you guys talked about this, we beg of you. We've seen destruction. We've seen sorrow. We've seen death. I beg of you to wake up today. I beg of you to listen closely. I beg of you to slow down this train of destruction and pay attention. Because there's a way. There's a path out of this. There's a path to success and happiness and all these things. I beg that you don't continue until you get too far. Until your life is lost. And that hits home. That hits home. Because we cannot do this work for someone else. I can't will someone else into recovery. In my experience, many of us have tried. We've seen things in others that we love, and we want to help them, but we can't force. We can't even sacrifice and martyr ourselves to do that work. And it's devastating. But reading that, going back to that, we beg of you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. Because in my experience, that has led to people getting this sooner, minimizing or mitigating the damage and destruction. It doesn't mean that we come out totally unscathed or perfect or with no scars, but we reduce the destruction that we sometimes seem bound and determined that has to take place. We put things off until tomorrow or next week or whatever. And so it hits home for the founders, for Bill Wilson, having witnessed that chaos and that pain, going, it doesn't have to be this way. It doesn't have to end like this. There's another way. So that next line, that last line on page 58, remember that we deal with alcohol, cunning, baffling, powerful. Without help, it is too much for us. But there is one who has all power. That one is God. May you find him now. Half measures availed us nothing. We stood at the turning point. We asked his protection and care with complete abandon. We're going to press pause right there as far as our recording. And in our next episode, we'll dig into the steps. But with these last two paragraphs, any thoughts from you guys, Dave and Joe, before we end today?
So, I think it's as I read over this, I'm just reminded that we don't do this alone. When it says without help it is too much for us, that's not only just a reminder of heavenly help, but also earthly help. We've got to be open to learning how to consistently and purposefully say, I need help. Because without it, when it says there is one who has all power, that one is God, and may you find him now, part of finding him is also allowing the helping hands to come into our life and serve us, and then learning that process ourselves and learning how that also becomes such a significant part of the service. But that service is also being the hand and the voice sometimes of God himself in working with others and helping them find their way. Whatever that looks like. For me, it's been transporting people from their home to a meeting and back, and having conversation along the way and just being blown away at just the significance of a conversation that I never thought I'd have that day. As far as the half measures availed us nothing, it's like in this work, you can't go through these steps. You can't go through the invitations that we've gone through and just say, okay, I'll do steps 1, 2, and 3. I'll skip 4 or 5. I'll do 6 and 7. I'll skip 8 and 9, and then I'll do all the others. It's like we have to do all of it to get the result. That's the only way it works. It says half measures availed us nothing. In other words, you will get nothing out of just doing it in a half measured way or half-hearted way or half-involved way. It doesn't work. It's an all or nothing proposition that we're dealing with. We are dealing with life and death. We have been doing suicide by the installment plan, and we've got to be reinvested into life and recreating that. We can't create that alone. That's what that means, at least to me, because when we're giving ourselves over to his care and protection, we need to understand what does the care of God look like. And sometimes it's not according to the way I think of it. It's according to the way that it shows up for me and allowing that into my life. Dave, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, if I were to get my phone out, I could show you a message from a fellow extraordinarily successful in business and otherwise, extraordinarily successful. And he called me and he said, why can't I get this? And he had been to treatment many, many times, high-end treatment, and I'd worked with him before, and I said, you can quote chapter and verse out of the book. You can tell me, page 100. You can tell me page 112. You can tell me. He loved the story of the carpet slippers, after a guy was dead in a few years, and he loved that story. And he said, I hope that's not me. And he said, what do you see? And I said, what I see is you can quote chapter and verse, but I said, my concern is the absorption rate. I said, it doesn't appear that it's going deep enough. So you're in the solution. It's just not transforming you. I said, I wouldn't dare venture a guess. I don't know if it's half measures. I don't know if it's 75% measures. I don't know if it's 25% measures. It doesn't matter because you're not transforming, and we continue to have these phone calls. And the last one I got, he let me know that he would do anything. He said, would you work with me individually? And I said, I will. And I said, but I can tell by the way you're talking right now that it's 10 o'clock in the morning and you're drinking. I said, so I want you to call me tomorrow at noon. And I said, just stay sober that long. And he didn't. And he died that night. Now that's a sobering story. But this is a man who, heart of gold, and I miss him. I miss his intellect. I miss his wit. I miss our camaraderie, all of that. And they're very blunt about this. Half measures availed us nothing. It's not a 1-for-1. It's not a zero-sum game. It's not half measures availed us half success. It was nothing. And he put that in there point blank. He starts a paragraph off, and he just very bold about that. Half measures availed us nothing. Buyer beware, zero.
No return.
And so I look at this, and I have a text on my phone right now from a fellow that I received yesterday. He's got about 12 years. And he said, I want to go to the next level. He said, I want to know what you know. What don't I know? I'm willing to do anything. And he's a good man, and he's working hard, and you know, again, he's doing this. He says, we asked his protection and care with complete abandon. He's saying, I'll do anything you tell me to. And he has. I've given him some assignments. We've worked together, and he has. And it's amazing the transformation that's taken place. So the reason I say all of that is to say this. We need to be very careful about this notion. And it said, when it says, until we let go absolutely, that's not us admitting complete and defeat and we're surrendering and we're not worth it, we're not worthy, none of that. It's literally shifting, because it says we hold on to old ideas. What we're saying is, we want you to be open, tell the truth, and are you open to new ideas? That's going to take a tremendous amount of guts, grit, and courage to do that, to admit that, okay, I got to shift this, and then not dwell in that, but dwell in the notion I'm absorbing new information. And he's about to introduce us, and we have, about one who has all power, and how can I access that? And I might have some old ideas about, God himself and that power. And I've got to be honest and state that. I got to clear that debris away so I can open up the conduit so I can receive. Something happened to me last night that I'll share that next time maybe. But it's incredible when it happens. And it happens immediately and distinctly. And all I can tell you is, if it worked for me, where did I get it? I got it from another guy. And where did he get it? He got it from another guy. In other words, there is more than enough what I call recovery oxygen in the universe. We can all absorb as much as we will take. There is no shortage. It's not a zero-sum game. And so we are about to go into the steps that they took, and they took that, which is what they did to get the results that they're now enjoying. Mm-hmm. And so I look forward to that, and what a pleasure. We have dismantled this first page and a half to great avail, and I love it. There's so much here, as Joe said. There's a lot to be unpacked. So I will just say thank you for letting me be a part of this, and it's a real honor and a privilege.
Thanks, Chris.
I'll echo that. Appreciate you men and your vulnerability, your counsel, and your wisdom. I get a lot out of this. This isn't just us three guys talking to an audience out there. I will share this. There have been times where we were set to record an episode. We were going to dig into the big book, and I've looked at these men and said, I'm not sure if we're going to record today. I'm dealing with something. I need your help. I need your support. I need that wisdom. This program works. It's incredible. It's incredible. But it takes willingness. It takes a lot of ability to look inward, and to hear other perspectives, to hear counsel and wisdom from others who've walked before, who have knowledge. So thank you for joining us. Thank you for being part of this. And we'll see you next time on this Do Your Dailies podcast. Have a great rest of your day. Take care.
Thanks for checking out this clip from the Do Your Dailies Big Book podcast. If you like what you hear and you want more, please like and subscribe and share this show with your friends, with your clients, with your sponsees. That's the best way to support us bringing you more recovery content. You can follow us on YouTube, Facebook, and X at Do Your Dailies. This podcast is sponsored by Hobble Creek Health and is edited and produced by Nielsen Digital.